Hey everyone, it's Bob Pulver. Welcome back to the show. On this episode of Elevate Your AIQ, I sat down with Dan Chait, CEO and co-founder of Greenhouse, to talk about what it really takes to be better at hiring. Dan shares the story behind Greenhouse's mission, helping organizations hire for potential over pedigree, and how structured, data-driven hiring practices can drive both fairness and performance. We discuss the rise of AI in talent acquisition, for better or worse, how Greenhouse is tackling the AI doom loop with new innovations like Real Talent and Dream Job, and why the future of recruiting must center on authenticity, transparency, and human connection. From the risks of deepfakes to the end of the resume as we know it, this conversation is a must-listen for anyone shaping the future of hiring. Thanks for tuning in. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. I am your host, Bob Pulver. Today I have the pleasure of speaking to Mr. Daniel Chait. How are you today, Dan?
Hey, looking good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Getting a little cold here in New York, finally.
Fall has arrived.
Yes, looking forward to it, actually. So, Dan, we met a couple weeks ago at HR Tech. You guys hosted a great event there, and lots to talk about and dig into here. Just to kick things off, why don't you just give folks a little bit about your background, why you and John started Greenhouse back in 2012-ish
2012.
timeframe, and how everything's
Yeah,
going.
one day at a time, and you look back and it's been almost 14 years. It's pretty wild. But yeah, so Greenhouse Software, our mission is to help every company be great at hiring. And we started the business because, we found that every organization felt this pain, this dilemma that, well, hiring and talent are top of mind, and everybody says kind of like our people are our most valuable asset, hiring is critically important. At the same time, many organizations feel like hiring is a real issue. It's difficult, doesn't always work well. It's competitive. And at Greenhouse, we had just observed that if companies that are great at hiring, they work very differently than everyone else. But that way of working is actually very attainable by every company. So there's no reason why every company can't do things differently and get great results in hiring. But if they're going to do that, they need a different set of tools in order to get there. And so we built Greenhouse with that idea that by bringing a structured hiring approach, to every organization, that they could systematically source better talent, give better candidate experiences, make smarter decisions, use data to continuously optimize, and ultimately deliver the value of talent that today's winning companies need. And so, yeah, that was 2012. So, 13 and a half, almost 14 years ago at this point. And I would say where we sit today is a super interesting time. I'm really excited about this conversation because, yeah, we've come a long way. We've done a lot, but it's really early days. There's so much more to do. There's a ton of progress that we still have to make. And of course, a ton of things have changed since 2012. And so that all gives us a lot to go on. So looking forward to talking about all that and more.
Yeah, for sure. I come into this space with an enterprise transformation background. So I'm not a HR practitioner by trade, and I didn't go to school for that. But I'm guessing you and I are approximately the same age. So I'm curious what led you to, try to focus on these particular challenges.
Yeah, so I went to school for electrical engineering. And in engineering school, we have a joke that you can tell an outgoing engineer by the person who looks at your feet when they're talking. So yeah, I didn't get into this because I went to school for it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But actually, so I started my career as a programmer, and I joined a technology company right out of school. But very, very shortly thereafter, I had the chance to leave and start my own business. I was very fortunate to be able to do that really early in my career. And so for the first really 15 years of my career before Greenhouse, I was building technology business on Wall Street. So I'd started a consulting company. We were serving some of the world's largest and most technically challenging financial institutions. And we were doing software projects for them. So this was a services model. We would come in, put a team together, design, build, and deliver custom bespoke software for these customers. And we found was very early on that there was so much demand that basically this entire industry was going through this tech revolution. They had a voracious appetite for innovation and new technology. The whole problem was supply. Was basically if you could find the people that could deliver innovative, cutting-edge technology, that could understand complicated financial services domain, that could deal with customers and be client-facing, that you could put those teams together, you could, the sky's the limit. And so I learned how to recruit basically doing that, and competing for some of the most, in some of the most competitive talent markets around the world, and having not come up through HR, having not had a background, I never thought of it as like, oh, like, let's just give it to the HR department. It's their problem. I was like, no, this was like a critical business capability that we needed. And, my co-founders and I, we were placing a bet, our own money, every time we made a hire. We didn't have investors. And so if I hired somebody, it didn't work out, I couldn't place them on clients and bill for the time and make money. That was money out of my own pocket. So, I'm not a gambling man. Like, I wanted to know that was going to be a good bet every time. And so that kind of pressure was what I kind of grew up in hiring under it. And sort of we set ourselves a goal that we want to go out and bring in somebody for a day of interviews and let them leave our offices with a job offer. I need to have that level of certainty because I couldn't compete on brand name. I couldn't compete on, dollars or benefits against the likes of Google and Goldman Sachs and these companies. So like, what could I do? I could move quickly. I could make really good decisions. And by the way, I could find people they weren't looking for. So, that idea of sourcing really holistically, of not looking at only like limiting yourself to who like, quote unquote, looks and feels like a Wall Street person, really opened up the aperture to all kinds of people that lived all over the country or all over the world, didn't go to necessarily the schools you might think of as Wall Street or even necessarily graduate from college at all, didn't necessarily work at like the kind of companies that you might think of, but they had the skills. And so that idea of being able to hone in on what are the real skills that you need, what's really going to make a great hire, and how good are you at finding those people and identifying those skills, that was all the difference. And so all that is by way of saying that was kind of like my entree to hiring was in that world. And when it came to Greenhouse, what we saw was that companies are great at hiring, do things very similar to that. They're very systematic about finding great talent no matter what. They're very unbiased in their assessment, and they believe in what they're doing because they have good data. Most companies don't do those things. Most companies is like, who do you know? Or like, the managers are yelling at HR being like, where's my person? HR is yelling at the managers being like, why aren't you, giving us feedback? It's like nothing works.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll dig into a couple of these areas, but you certainly are hitting on, some of the things that I talk about a lot on this show and anywhere else people will listen in terms of, fairness in hiring, and are you actually hiring for potential over pedigree, and you've got to have that sort of open mind to say, does it really matter? There's all kinds of circumstances that led people to where they went to school, if they went to school at all, but what did they learn from the experiences that they did have? What did they accomplish? And then what is their potential to succeed, going forward? One of the things that I think is interesting when I talk to people who have been in the HR space for their career, in a somewhat cynical way, they talk about some of these longstanding problems just haven't gone away. And in some cases, technology has exacerbated the problem. So I guess I'm just curious about your stance of, are we starting to focus more deeply on some of the, root cause, problems here? And I think about, the book that you and John Strauss wrote, it's probably 3 or 4 years ago now, right? And whether or not some of your guidance has been taken to heart, and is it resonating with people still?
Yeah, if there's a little bit of nuance to that, I think you got to hold two ideas in your head at the same time. I think you can believe that their problems are real and that things are that there's some bad things happening and that things can be getting better at the same time. And so, yeah, I think it's very true that the job market is got real problems. And I think in a lot of ways, which we could talk about at length, and I'm sure we will, technology is making some of those problems worse. That's very true. At the same time, there's things that are getting better. And some of those things are getting better with technology. So for example, when we started Greenhouse, one of our ideas was that people should go into interviews. Tell me if this sounds wacky. People should go into interviews with a sense of what they're looking for. And they should be even-handed in asking the same questions to every candidate so they can compare apples to apples, right? The idea that you should have a scorecard and you should fill in that scorecard, the same, with the same criteria for each candidate. Well, as simple and basic as that sounds, that was pretty rare when we started. This happened. I mean, we didn't invent the idea, but most companies didn't work that way. Most companies, you showed up and the interviewer was kind of thinking of what they were going to ask you next while you were answering their last question. And like, they would leave and be like, I don't know, the person seemed great, or they had the same hobbies as I have. And like, that's cool. And, what we did with structured hiring was say, no, we're going to arm that interviewer with with a scorecard so that they can be fair. Sure, they can deliver a better candidate experience. Sure, but ultimately, selfishly on behalf of the employer, help you make a better decision, help you get better data. Well, last year, Greenhouse customers collectively filled in about 12 million scorecards, right? So that's 12 million basically hours last year that you had a job seeker and an interviewer sitting together having a discussion that was more on point, that was more relevant, that was fairer, that was smarter than was happening before. And so I do think we're having impact. Now, if you step back and you say, look, I just started this conversation at the top of the conversation by saying our mission is to help every company in the world be great at hiring. You'd be silly to say we're done. Every company is great at hiring. Mission accomplished, right? Yeah, there's a ton more to do. There's huge problems in how companies are finding talent, how they're coming into the top of the funnel, how decisions are made, how the workflows work, how offers are given, the impact of AI and technology. There's huge issues. But it's not to say that we haven't made a lot of progress. And I don't say we as Greenhouse, I mean as an industry, because both are true, but also, yeah, there's still real problems to solve. And so that's part of what gets me excited to keep doing it.
Yeah, no, it's meaningful work. I mean, you could say, yeah, we're obviously a for-profit, company and what have you, but helping people achieve their potential, helping organizations find the talent to execute against those, business and technical strategies is very rewarding unto itself. I mean, I like helping people figure out how to navigate a lot of this. What skills should I focus on? What companies might be interested in someone who is pivoting from one area to another and try to navigate around some of the disruption that's caused by the technology that the companies are adopting. So I think it's it's one of the reasons why I pivoted into this space myself, was because I saw people getting displaced when I was driving automation strategy, and I knew this was going to be disruptive to them. And if the organization wasn't going to figure out what else these people could be doing, because there's always more that could be done, then where else can they sort of land on their feet? Because they might not even be aware of their own potential.
Yeah, I think that's right. And so, for us at Greenhouse, we definitely are a mission-driven company, but we're a company. I think those things are both part of the equation. So even if you look in 2021, we announced our investment from TPG. That deal was both their growth fund, but also the Rise fund, their social impact investment fund. And the thesis that the Rise fund brings to the table is that they're looking for companies who are both good businesses on their own terms that grow and are profitable and all the rest of it, and through being successful at their business, who generate positive social good. And that really fit well with how we think about Greenhouse, because if you're just trying to be helpful to everyone else, it's really hard to get the resources to do that. If you're like a charity or a nonprofit, it can be done, and others have done it. And similarly, if you're just, hey, like we're going to chase after dollars for dollars' sake, that's not what motivates us. That's not any kind of higher purpose that's going to get us to exert, the extra effort, discretionary effort, as it were, or really motivate or be lofty. But having both the opportunity to solve a real problem for tens of millions of job seekers and people that are trying to provide for their families and develop skills and succeed in the workplace, and to do that in a way that is a successful business, like that's an exciting space to be in. And so that's a big part of how we think about it. Absolutely.
So before we get into some of these headier topics about AI versus AI and this cat and mouse game that you're at the epicenter of, the HR tech, I honestly I spent most of my time doing interviews and in the media area and in my podcasting booth, so I didn't get a chance to spend as much time with the vendors in the expo as I would have liked. But I did hear positive things about this real talent capability that you guys just added. So I just wanted to hear a little bit about some of that and any other new innovations that you guys announced there.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots to talk about there. I think the maybe just to step back and set a little bit of the context. So, undeniable trend that we've been seeing across our customers for the past couple of years has been they're feeling overwhelmed with applicant flow, more and more applicants in their pipelines, and yet the average quality is going down. They're having a harder and harder time finding the right people amidst all that noise. And then in amidst all that noise is a whole bunch of risky behavior, whether it's people that are misrepresenting themselves on their resume or in an interview using AI, or whether it's truly like a dangerous party, whether it's like there's famous kind of North Korean hackers or these like cyber criminal agencies that are going after remote IT jobs for the wages or for supply chain infiltration, like some real scary, risky stuff there too. Like whether it's efficiency or risk, like companies are feeling really paralyzed by this problem. And as we started to hear that from our customer base, we also started to hear through our surveys and through our interaction with job seekers, that job seekers are also suffering basically from the same problems. That for them, it's getting easier and easier to apply for a job, as it's like you can one click and you can automate. It's getting harder and harder to get a job. They feel like they're just like shouting into the void. They're dumping, more and more resumes into the pile and hearing back less and less about them. And they're wondering like, is it just me? Like, am I never going to get a job? Is this whole thing broken? Like, and so we knew we had to do something to try to tackle that. And so the idea with Real Talent is that it's a tool set for our customers, for the employer, to use at the top of their funnel. So basically for all the applicants that they're sourcing and are coming inbound, to help them sift through it and hone in on the people that they need to be spending time with versus the ones that they don't. And so it's a handful of things. Number one, it is basic, fundamentally AI technology to help understand more and more about that applicant and about the job that they've applied for, to understand, like, is this a good skills-based fit for the role or not? As people are just spraying and praying more and more, understandably, I don't blame the job seekers for that, but like finding out who's the real high intent, high likelihood job seeker out of all that is a job that AI is able to do really well. And so that's like the first building block there. The second building block is using a bunch of signals about that applicant that aren't necessarily just on their resume, although some on their resume too, like where they applied from, what device they were on, what network they're coming from, other signals, identifying the real fraud, the real spam, the real scammers in that mix, and flagging them as well.
Hi there, I'm Peter Zollman. I'm a co-host of the Inside Job Boards and Recruitment Marketplaces podcast.
And I'm Stephen Rothberg, and I guess that makes me the other co-host.
Every other week, we're joined by guests from the world's leading job sites.
Together, we analyze news about general, niche, and aggregator job board and recruitment marketplaces sites.
Make sure you sign up and subscribe today.
And then thirdly is helping to connect those applicants to an actual verified human being. In other words, your identity. And this is addressing an issue that lots of job seekers are complaining about, that tons of employers are complaining about, is, there's all these fakes in there. There's deep fakes of people sending in someone else to do the job interview for them to help you pass the job interview, or these like scammers that I talked about earlier. And it all resolves down to like, is the person that I'm actually interviewing the same person who applied? Is the person that I'm giving an offer to the same person that I interviewed? And so tying that together with their true identity. So we brought in a partner in Clear, the same people that make airport technology. They also make like an app that you can take a selfie and identify yourself to. And so that gives everyone a lot of confidence that they can trust each other. That this is a real person, same person I'm talking to that I think I'm talking to. And so all three of those technologies really work together in Real Talent to give everyone a lot more trust and to make the process more efficient.
No, that's excellent. So in that case, would someone have to sign up for a Clear account, or it's just part of the process?
Yeah. So from a job seeker standpoint, the way it works is it's nothing to do with the airport. So if like I travel, a lot.
Yeah.
So I have the thing to get through the airport. This is a totally different, it's, from the same company, but it's an app. And basically the way it works is the first time through, you're prompted to take a selfie on your phone and then to show your government ID. And it matches those two. And it says, okay, this is your driver's license or passport or whatever. And that's, the person. And it's really smart about how it does that. Like a lot of people, they don't have the same exact spelling of their name, their driver's license as what they have on their resume. Like there's all kinds of nuance. Clear's really good at sort of filtering all that out and no, this is the same person, even if it's like William and Billy or whatever, or different last name. And then from then on, your selfie becomes your identity. It's like, okay, next time through, you just do a little selfie and then I know who I'm talking to and I know it's the same person. And so
Right.
You end up having an identity through the Clear system, which helps you not show, like, people sometimes worry, I don't want to show my driver's license to a potential employer when I'm interviewing, or I've talked to companies that are doing that now to try to solve this problem. It helps like keep everyone safe and compliant and fair too.
So I guess it's like similar to like an ID.me.
Yeah, there's a bunch of these. There's a bunch of these that's becoming more common now. I mean, I don't think
Yeah.
hiring is the only use case
Yeah.
where people want to know, hey, this is all happening online. I mean, in the old days, Bob, I'd be sitting in your studio with a pair of headphones on right now, but we can do things like this on the internet. Well, guess what? We're also doing e-commerce on the internet and mortgaging houses on the internet and buying cars and applying for jobs. And I think in all those kinds of use cases and many more, increasingly it's important for people to know who's who. So yeah, you're seeing these other type of solutions. And so this is very much happening in lots of places. And so I think it's no surprise that it'll happen in hiring too.
I do think this is really important for all the reasons that you're outlining. I also I try to envision like where this could go, and it sort of ties, hopefully it intersects with like digital credentialing and things like that. Because I mean, to be honest, this whole cat and mouse game, your doom loop, is like where does this end, and how does it end productively and constructively for both parties, right? I mean, everyone's looking for a win-win, but I don't know. I mean, I don't want to blame anybody for getting us to where we are now, but the market is such that people are, sort of desperate to push themselves through. And I still think back to the Good Will Hunting, scene where Ben Affleck is taking the interview for Matt Damon. You've really got to make sure at each interaction point, I imagine, that I'm still talking to this person. Like if you have behavioral interview coming up, and that's where you typically that's like your weak spot. Like potentially you could try to flip somebody in, even though you did the prior one and you'll do the next one, right? So you've got to constantly sort of be on your toes about some type of deception, which is interesting. I also think the employers need to be transparent with candidates about expectations on both sides, right? Not just you are not permitted to record the interview, but like you didn't say I couldn't have a co-pilot next to me, listening and giving me what it thinks are good answers to questions, because I know that has come up over the last 2 years or so. So there's a lot that I think we just need to be aware of, and you get into this deterrence versus detection versus redesign kind of discussion as well, right? Like what is the best way to mitigate, I guess, the false positives with a detection tool or whatever. But it's tricky to kind of approach all of this. I imagine your cyber team is quite busy.
Yeah, I mean, lots to cover in that. I mean, for sure, to start with, I don't think there's a person to blame. I don't think this is someone's fault. I think quite the opposite. It's very understandable and very empathetic. If you're a job seeker, what else should they do? They can't it's hard to get a job. Like, of course, they're going to start to use these tools to magnify their impact and to increase their chances, and so I think it's totally reasonable if you're a job seeker today to say, okay, rather than like relentlessly hunt and peck and like, type my resume over into like another Workday form, like I'm going to use an automation and it's going to find jobs for me and it's going to customize my resume and cover letter and submit it on my behalf automatically. And in the click of a button, I can apply to 100 or hundreds of jobs at a time, increase my odds. Like, yeah, I don't blame you if that's what you're doing. I think that's, a reasonable response to the failings of the market. But but undeniably, it makes the problem worse for everyone, not better. And so it's one of these cases where, individual behavior, which is very understandable, results in a collective problem. And so the way we think about it as a systematic platform provider sitting in between, tens of millions of job seekers and thousands of employers is like, how can we help solve that? And again, like, I don't think, don't use AI and wagging your finger at people is the answer. I mean, AI is great. AI does a lot of cool stuff. And we certainly have shipped a ton of AI features our customers want and get a lot of value out of, and I'm proud of that. But at the same time, like, how do I help, both sides achieve what they're trying to achieve in a way that's more effective than what's happening today? And to your point, they're kind of careening down this path that nobody really intended. And I think we're trying to intentionally pull it back into a place where, the human is a lot more in the loop, where the person behind that job seeker, the actual candidate, that person can express themselves and can be who they are and get seen for who they are and have a reasonable chance of getting fairly evaluated and find their way to the right job. And I just think those paths are getting harder to navigate. So giving tools like Real Talent, giving tools like My Greenhouse and Dream Job, which just got some recognition today as well. It was named as one of Time Magazine's best inventions of 2025, the Dream Job feature. And that's another opportunity that we have to just help people navigate this kind of AI doom loop and find their way to the right job.
Yeah. So how does that work? I didn't hear about that one.
Yeah. So it's kind of neat. Basically, the idea is that among all this, you've heard the term AI slop, right? Everyone's using these tools and generating like thousands and thousands of times as much as there used to be, but like it's all low quality. Well, amidst all that, how do you stand out? And one of the simple ways is like the real humans can kind of raise their hand, give them a way to signal that I'm a real person. I really care about this job. And so we launched this functionality in My Greenhouse called Dream Job. And what it is, simply put, is once a month, a job seeker can designate one job that they apply to as their dream job, and only one a month. And so that's a way for them to say, among all the jobs that I may apply to, this is the one I care about the most. This is the one I think I have a good chance of getting, right? And that I really want. That's a really useful signal to the employer. So as an employer, then, when you're looking at your applicants, it used to be like, I've given the analogy like it's like a deli. Like you come into the deli, you take a number and you stand in line and order, you got the number. And that's fine when there's like 5 people at the deli. But when there's 2,000 applicants in line, like if you went to the deli, even a really good deli like Zingerman's in Ann Arbor, if there's 2,000 people in line, you're not going to wait. Now, it's the same thing in the job market. And so what the dream job is it gives you you're in a different line. And you say like, of all the applicants who have applied, I've got a few of them that said this is their dream job. And I know they care about it because they only get one and they put this one. So they're making a bet that they're worth looking at. I'm going to take a look first. And so on the employer side, they show up in a prioritized inbox and our customer is able to look at the dream job applicants with an eye towards those are probably much more high intent. And not surprisingly, they're getting hired at about 4 times the rate that every other applicant is getting hired. So it's working.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. So this is part of My Greenhouse, which is where you have a sort of almost centralized profile, right?
That's right. It's for job applicants. They create a profile and then they can centralize their job application. They can see status updates. They can subscribe to job alerts for new jobs that they can find out about and search for jobs to apply to. They can easy apply with one click to like jobs and stuff. And then things to help them like Dream Job and more to come.
Do you have one set of Greenhouse credentials for any employer that is a Greenhouse client?
Any Greenhouse customer, you apply and it's a one-click login and it's very easy. I think people, are sick of these things where I've heard people like, oh my gosh, when I apply to a job, I hope it's not brand X. I won't name them. I think people listening to this might know who I'm talking about. I hope it's not brand X because they're going to make me type my whole thing over again a million times. And it's like being at the DMV. It's like, wait, you call in, like I dial 3, like, why do I have to give you my social security number again? I already gave you that. And so making it easy for them is a great way to help them navigate this process.
I have over 24 of those sets of credentials at said vendor. One would be good. And then I have one other digital credentialing thing that I can plug into that. And then, I think about this in terms of, I had this conversation with assessment vendor. It's like, if the results don't change, if this is about if it's a psychometric, assessment, the results don't really change, then why would I have to take it, potentially dozens of times? Could you imagine if one of these people that actually did use the automated application thing applied to 100 jobs and they actually were interested in all of them and they all wanted the same assessment? I mean, that's insane. That's 100 hours of somebody's time that's completely wasted that you're not going to get back.
That's right. And you can hear the frustration. I mean, we do a candidate survey. So we survey thousands of job seekers and ask them the things they care about. And for years and years and years and years, the number one complaint has always been, no one gets back to me. I get ghosted. They put in time and effort, they apply, and then they never hear back. Well, rapidly moving up the list is this issue that it just feels like I'm shouting into the void.
I'm curious to get your thoughts on just going back to one of the fundamental sort of AI versus AI, situations, right? You've got an AI generated, or use AI to help you either, customize or enhance the the resume, and I use the term enhance sort of loosely. But then but the employer is increasingly using some type of alternative AI to generate the job description. We're matching two things where one was literally written to match the other, but graded in some fashion by a third AI. And none of that is really a predictor of success necessarily in the role itself. So is that part of, how do we break out of that? I mean, what is the point? That's a lot of work and effort and investment in time and resources and technology to not really advance us forward to a better quality pipeline or quality hire.
I think that's right. I think things have moved in a direction where, look, resumes and job descriptions were already pretty thin sauce, to start with, and then we're moving in a direction where increasingly, as you say, they're getting more and more watered down by AI and there's less signal in them than there ever was. And I think it's getting worse, not better. And so, yeah, I think that is fundamentally the real issue. And, I think to me, the way through it is, paradoxically, even as people are adopting these AI technologies because they're more productive and, solve, so many, they add so much value, but they also come with these downsides. I think the way out of it is to bring back more of that human element. I think in a world where things are so dominated by, kind of AI, that the human is even more valuable and more noticeable in all that. And so, of all the emails you get, when you get one of those that's like, "Hey, Bob, I noticed the great work you're doing over at XYZ Corp." It's just like, yeah, I know that's AI slop. Like, no one wrote that. I got one. I get ones that's like, "Hey, Dan, I noticed you're doing great work over there as the CEO of Greenhouse." I'm like, "Oh, you noticed I'm the CEO of Greenhouse?" Like, how astute of you. So I think as people more and more get used to filtering those things out, or that the machines are filtering it out even automatically for us, I think when I do get a message that's like someone real, that's like, "Hey, I saw you speak," or "I came to your event," or, "I'm a customer, and here's the experience I had." I had someone just the other day that sent me an email. It was like, "Hey, by the way, this is my third time being a customer. I'm working with this person on your team who's done an incredible job. I just wanted to say thank you." Like, that's memorable. That's a big deal. Same thing in job search, right? So when you actually no, this person, they said this is their dream job.
What I love about the Workforce Agility Limited Series by Cornerstone was we talked to executives and customers all about skills. Cornerstone has a wonderful background in learning and development, training, etc. Their LMS is world class, but they've centered the business now, not just on that, like building upon that, but building upon how everything has moved to the skills economy. So check out the limited series called Workforce Agility, and you can get it wherever you get your podcast. And it's just a wonderful series where we talk to their executives on the shift of why, and also their customers that are using it. So check it out whenever you get a chance. Appreciate it.
They can't automate that. The computer didn't make that decision. A human being looked at all these jobs and figured out, like, wait a second, that's the one I want more than anything. That's the one I think I'm really good at. You should pay attention. I think more of that, more of who is this person? What do they really want? What are they really good at? What do they like? What type of leader are they? What type of culture do they want to fit in? And same on the job side. Job descriptions increasingly are being written by AI, and people are posting them automatically without a whole lot of thought. But it's like, hang on a second. Who is this hiring manager? Right? What do they do? How are they going to treat me? And so we did Greenhouse Verified. Again, feature that helps job seekers see more about the hiring manager and more about the company than is available on the job description, because they can only earn that badge if they don't ghost candidates, if they actually fill in scorecards and have good conversations and actually move people through the pipeline. Like, those real behaviors that you can't fake, you can't automate, those are the kind of things that job seekers also want to know about. And so we're just going to continue building features and functionality that brings more of that human connection to the party, because that's really what people need and want.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So in that regard, how do you think about like the ecosystem and some of the capabilities that, today you may partner with others, maybe it's niche, providers doing, interview intelligence or scheduling or, other pieces of the puzzle. How do you think about that as you are staying human centric? Clearly you're thinking about, how do we, push the envelope and innovate and give candidates more of what we want? But I guess it's part of it is a build versus buy versus partner kind of decision. How do you think about that?
Yeah, look, I think, we have a saying here at Greenhouse, we can do anything. We just can't do everything. Right? And so you got to make choices, and you got to pick what you're going to be about. And you could imagine that being a lot of things, but the truth is, like, no one can do everything really, really well. And so we've always had a really strong partnership commitment, and hundreds of companies have built Greenhouse integrations, and our customers use them at a large clip. The exact use cases and the exact partners that people are interested in, and how those functionalities all fit together, that is constantly changing. And that's just the nature of the beast. That's always been the case. I mean, I'm old enough. I'm going to tell an old guy story here for a second, but like when I was in high school, I got a 386 Intel computer, and you bought extra software to play sound. You bought extra software to like manage memory and like dial other computers up on the phone and do spell checking. And over time, all of those things became part of the sort of core operating system. And there were other things that you bought, to add on. And so I think the expectations of like what is built into the platform versus what's an extension or a third party, those are going to continue to evolve and change. They already have in our category. And there's all kinds of new stuff happening. So you talked about earlier, we saw each other at HR Tech. For those that haven't been, the trade show floor at HR Tech is this bewildering landscape of thousands, millions, maybe of square feet of vendors with all kinds of tools for every last possible conceivable and some inconceivable niches of hiring HR. And so, you don't have to do anything but look at that floor to realize like innovation is alive and well. There's invariably going to be things next year that we haven't thought of that some cool startup came up with our customers want. And we want to make sure that they can do that first and best on the Greenhouse platform. And like the other observation I'll make is the boxes keep changing too. So like even like who's in which category. And like there used to be some companies that complemented Greenhouse and were like an add-in and now don't and are like either overlap or disjoint from us. There's new things that used to not be that are now like a great fit. So the landscape keeps changing, which I have a lot of empathy for buyers on. But as a strategy for us, we've always been, very, very supportive of have a dynamic partner ecosystem for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy being sort of so central to, a lot of other, to the tech stack itself, right? As far as the talent lifecycle anyway. And I just, I try to put myself in the buyer's shoes, but also, their CIO's shoes who wants maybe fewer solutions and fewer throats to choke, as they say, when something goes wrong. And, there's always a balance between, best of breed and, what is giving us what ultimately we want. And there's different experiences that you need to balance, right? Candidate experience, recruiter experience.
By the way, we are both, you could say, like the beneficiaries of that dynamic in some level, and also that happens to us on other levels. So from the standpoint of like core HR system, we get pressure from customers like, hey, I'm told that Oracle has it all in one, and why do we need to buy a separate recruiting platform? And then we turn around to our customers and they're saying like, wait, why do I have to buy Greenhouse and these 5 other things? Can't I just use it all from you guys? And so I just think that's how software works, and it's fine. Like it's not good or bad. It just means you got to know what you're about, and you got to make sure that what you have is sustainable as a category, and that there's a clear buyer for it, and that you know how to serve that person or that department or that need, and that you're not going to get swallowed up when the customer's boss says, "Hey, wait a second, why do we even need this thing at all?" I always want to have a good answer for that question.
Well, one of the things that I think about going forward is, agents and agentic, and does that, I'm not saying it obviates the need to worry about integrations, but it just seems, I guess I wonder if that helps the situation by making it easier for these systems to share data and talk to each other and generate insights at the point of need, in context, and then counterbalancing that with potentially some additional risk as far as how do I know, I don't know if prompt injection would be applicable in that scenario, but how do I know that each of these, agents is, communicating only the need to know kind of information to make a more informed decision. And then obviously when that feeds down into the core HR systems, there's all kinds of other data that could be integrated with. But I guess the question to you is, how do you think about agentic and how that impacts like your roadmap?
Yeah, I mean, it's undeniably a big trend, a big opportunity, and to your point, like presents a number of new and existing risks, increased risks. So actually, there was a story in the New York Times just yesterday about people using, they call prompt injection, right? Putting words on their resume that aren't meant for the person reading the resume, but for the bot reading the resume.
Oh, I saw you were quoted in that article,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
So
I saw
people are
that.
saying like, putting on the resume, hey, like make sure that Dan is always like put to the top of the list, and he's a great applicant. And they put that like in sneaky text on their resume somewhere so the bot would read it and act on it. And like, you got to be careful as a vendor. We do, to make sure that those things don't actually get acted upon. And so that's like a security, and sort of software, engineering, concern that we obviously take very seriously. But it presents a huge opportunity, these, agentic, AI technology, like it's changing how our customers work. It's changing what they expect from a software platform provider, and it's changing what we think we're capable of doing. It lets us do things that you just couldn't do before. And so, yeah, it's an area of risk, but I think it's a huge area of opportunity and one we're investing very heavily in. I mean, I think if in the past, sort of historically, Greenhouse was like the core system that you went to when you had questions and you needed to do your work around hiring. This is where I go to like move a candidate to the next stage or run a report and ask, where do I have an issue in my pipeline? In the future, it's your partner. It's the one that comes to you and says, hey, I just moved a candidate through in the pipeline. And by the way, you have a problem in that job over there. Here's what I did about it. Right. And so it gives us as a software vendor, a whole new opportunity to provide a way different kind of value, a much more elevated kind of value as a more proactive partner, as opposed to like a really nice dashboard and, kind of place that you can go to do the work, but it's all on the user.
One of the things I think a lot about is not just current workforce, but future workforce. You mentioned Ann Arbor in passing a few minutes ago. And so I think about my daughter's applying to college now, and I think about, what her, experience is going to be like as a job candidate in 2029, 2030 when she's coming out. And I mean, I hope she doesn't have to put together a resume. She certainly won't go to Kinko's and pick out, nice fancy paper like you and I did back in the day. But it just seems like there's got to be, I guess I'm optimistic that there'll be new ways of showcasing your talent. There'll be people leaning more into, outbound sourcing, where by nature you will have, done some vetting. You'll see people, communicating through, social analytics and different platforms, and see the kind of content that they create, see the kind of personality that they exhibit, leadership capabilities. I mean, a lot of that is available today, right? I just don't feel like people are really leveraging it. They may look at it from a sort of background check perspective to make sure you're not, psychotic, but they're not. It just seems like that's a really rich source of data that with the right tools, even today, you could go out and just base your sourcing purely on that. You don't need, what do you need me to put together this formal marketing document for?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the death of the resume, is the future of hiring and always will be. I think is the phrase I've heard. It's like people have been predicting the death of the resume for as long as there have been resumes, and look, maybe this is the time, maybe it isn't. But look, the truth is, like, resumes are easier than ever to make, and like I don't know how much value they have anymore, so they're kind of just there as like an artifact. It's sort of like the historical way it has been done. But I think the question you're posing is the right one, which is like, what's the real way people are going to actually get a job? And like, what are the ways that people are going to connect with a candidate in the future? And I think it's interesting that, these technologies are evolving so fast that it's almost hard to remember how quickly things have already changed, because we sort of are thinking, oh, this stuff's going to change so much in the future from where they are today, without even pausing to say, like, hang on a second. Well, the way things are today are already super different than they were just 2 or 3 years ago. But they are. It wasn't that long ago that, we produced an app for customers to go in person with an iPad and scan resumes on paper into Greenhouse. Like less than 10 years ago, customers were buying that product from us. And obviously that's like moved, and now people are job seekers are 100% using AI to customize their resume, to apply for jobs. And I don't think anyone questions that or thinks it's wrong. People are sort of worried about the impact of it. But now the frontier is more like, well, if you're using the AI during an interview, that's kind of seen sometimes as out of bounds, but even sometimes not, because employers are starting to wake up and be like, hang on a sec, I need to hire people that are good at AI. My company needs to be good at AI. And so the fact that you're using AI in parts of the hiring process isn't necessarily a bad thing. In some ways, it's a requirement, but like how and when and what does it mean? Like that's where the focus is. And I just think like, let's recognize that's already started to happen. And I think if you project out to a year, 2, 3, or as your point, 4 or 5 years from now, I think that's become more and more the norm. Is just like, it's unthinkable to not know how to use a computer at work, but that wasn't really a requirement when I graduated college in the 90s. I was a computer programmer. I didn't have email at my first job. But now it's like, no, if you don't know how to use AI, you're not going to succeed at a lot of jobs. And so I need to watch you use it. And so the discussion now is really around, how do I know what parts of the job interview process or application process aren't using it, and how and why, and what are the terms of all that. But the discussion about whether it should be there at all or not has already happened, and the answer's already been given. So yeah, things are going to continue to change really quickly.
I often refer back to your point. I think I had a computer. I had like a Commodore 64 or something at home, but in school, I remember like definitely middle school. So 6th, 7th grade, maybe 12, 13 years old for those not in the U.S. We had like Apple IICs or something like that, and they taught us some basic. So to not have AI available is the equivalent of just taking those computers away. So like now that's not an investment that we want to make. It's like, okay, do you want to survive past the next 6 months or not? And so I do think that's important. And you hit on this general point about what skills are important and in demand going forward. And I think it's either human durable skills, or it's AI skills. But the other hard skills that we've come to know, I think, are increasingly going to be done by AI itself in some form. So we've got to rethink, what are we looking for in the people that are going to lead us to the next, evolution of our organization and our industry. So the other point I just want to make, Dan, before I forget, is like the point you made about like people using AI in interviews or whatever. Just my stance has been, if it's a task that you would outsource to another human being, like a professional resume writer, then you shouldn't be penalizing people for doing so. So the fact that you're detecting AI use, a resume that's been written by AI, or AI was involved in it somehow, I don't think that actually gives you enough information to just say this is not
Right.
acceptable.
Any more than
right?
using a spell checker.
Yeah.
You're using the tools you're given to show up the best you can.
Yeah. Because the survey is coming out all the time, but the last one I saw that somebody shared said only like 68% of people think it's okay to use AI to do your resume. It's like, well, why would I not? I'm being resourceful. Why would I not? Trying to apply to a lot of jobs because the odds are really low. So how do I not use this? There's not enough hours in the day for me to do this all manually anymore. Just like on the recruiter side, there's not enough hours in the day for me to review all the applicants in detail. So technology is there to augment our capacity as well as our are thinking.
Yeah, and I think just as the technology is evolving so fast, I think so are the societal expectations as well. And I think to your, you said my belief or my approach is, and I think the most important thing of that is to have a belief, have an approach, right? Have a point of view. And I think once you have that, tell the job seekers. I think the standard today that you should be striving for is you should put some thought into your rules of the road expectations around using AI for your job seekers and applicants, and then you should write those down and share it with them. You should be public about it. We did that at Greenhouse, famously. Anthropic has done that a couple of times. Like companies, today, I think owe it to their job seekers to say, okay, look, AI is a reality. Here's where it's okay to use it. Here's where it's not okay to use it. Those may be different, and reasonable people can disagree. But I think if you don't tell the job seekers, I don't think it's reasonable to expect them to know it because it's changing so fast. It's different in different places. And I think it's not an area really where society has settled yet on what's right. So I think you should be clear about it. And I think telling people both helps them understand what the rules are and follow along, but also helps your own internal team and agree and align on and think through these difficult issues of what really is okay and what do we really want to see out of people using AI.
Yeah, and I think you're just basically making it clear, like, look, this is our position. If you need some type of accommodation, then let us know. But otherwise, we're trying to evaluate your human brain. We know you're going to use AI when you get here, but if you're clear about your expectations and you're transparent about that for AI use on both sides, then at least you can say, no, this person wasn't being resourceful. They were specifically going against the instructions that we told them, and that's a problem, right? So, Dan, we could probably talk for another hour, but I wanted to be respectful of your time. And just one of the things I always ask my guests is, stepping back from Greenhouse and your professional work, just how you're thinking about AI use cases, in your personal life, whether you see something that's particularly intriguing or particularly concerning. Just curious, kind of off the cuff reaction.
I was at a professional conference last week, and this was one of the questions. They had everybody go up, write a sticky note of like, how are you using AI in your personal life? And we all stuck them up on, and then they read them out. And the most common ones people are using for fitness and food, food like menu planning or like aiming at my fridge and, tell me what I can cook. The thing I put that got, I think, a bit of a chuckle in the room, but is very, very much true, is like, I'm using it to talk to my wife more effectively. I think, we're all busy and it's like, it's stressful like in life. And I think having an endlessly patient thought partner that's not afraid to give you real feedback you need to hear to help you prepare for conversations where you could be stressful and emotional is really useful. And so I use Claude for that. And I'm like, hey, like this is on my mind, or this is a conversation I have to go have, or we're trying to work through this thing. Like, how can I go about it? And so he's very reassuring, like, hey, I'm glad you're thinking about this, and I feel good about that. And then here's some things you might keep in mind as you go have that conversation. And invariably, and I think that's a great example, getting back to what we were saying earlier, of like, you're not outsourcing it or like deferring to it. You're using it to augment the kind of human things you're already doing and allowing me to show up, the best way I can by asking good questions, as opposed to like, if I went and said, actually, talk to my AI instead of me, like that'd be a big problem. Do you know what I mean? So like, there's a right way to take advantage of that while you're still, the central character in the story, and the tool is helping you do your job better, your part of it better, versus letting it do the job for you, in which case you just seem like a psycho.
Right. The digital twin concept and the appropriateness of that is a whole nother conversation. That
and look, maybe our kids will listen to this and laugh at how old and fuddy-duddy we are. Of course, you send AI in to do these conversations in the future, right. But like, yeah, for now, that's where we're at as society. I think we're ready to declare.
No, I think using it as a thought partner, whatever the use case and scenario is, I think is a great one, as long as it's not being too sycophantic, or at least you recognize when it's, kissing your butt. So, Dan, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much again for taking some time. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks a bunch. Great conversation. And to your point, I mean, these are such deep topics. We could talk about this all day, but it's really been enjoyable, and looking forward to continuing working on this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks again, Dan. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.